Hi. So, chapter 2 of the Mennyms. Consternation. The letter from Albert Pond shot through the tightly sprung letterbox of 5 Brocklehurst Grove on a wet October morning before any of its residents had stirred from their beds. It was Saturday. Sounds like the postman's been, said Vinetta with a yawn. Joshua turned in his sleep and grunted. He didn't want to wake up. His tattered left leg was wrapped to the knee in an old bath towel, and he was not looking forward to the day ahead. I suppose I'd better go and look, said Vinetta, pulling herself up out of bed and putting on her slippers. The curtains showed a pale daylight, so she went downstairs without switching on the light and picked up the airmail letter from the doormat. An airmail letter, she thought, with some surprise. The only letters the Mennyms ever received were of the business sort. Cheques for Sir Magnus and other letters from his publishers, household bills and receipts, catalogues for Appleby, and occasional flattering offers to take part in prize draws. Never personal letters. And never letters from abroad. Vinetta looked at the envelope more carefully. "It's for Grandpa," she exclaimed. In the best bedroom at the front of the house, Grandpa Mennym was still asleep. His elegant white moustache flowed over his lips. He had been born knowing 1,000 pearls of wisdom. That is a lot of knowledge. So he found it necessary to lie and think deep thoughts every day of his life. His advice was not always taken, but it was deemed to be well worth hearing. Magnus was physically the least active member of the family. He never left his bed. His only mobility was in one purple velvet foot that dangled from the counterpane. The twins, Poopy and Wimpy, sometimes tried to rouse their grandfather by swinging on this tempting appendage. But soon the foot would simply grow forcefully rigid and kick the two of them to the other side of the room. Then they would scream the place down as if the impact had really hurt them. It was one of their favourite pretends. If their mother, Vinetta, was by when this happened, she would say briskly, "Don't make such a fuss, you two. It'd take more than Grandpa's foot to knock the stuffing out of you. Go and play with Googles. Or ask Appleby to show you her stamp collection." When Vinetta came to Grandpa's room on this particular October morning, the old man did not stir. The purple foot dangled limply over the edge of the bed. "Grandpa," said Vinetta loudly, as she opened the curtains, "there's a letter for you from Australia. Isn't that where the owner lives?" Grandpa looked at her sharply, focusing the black button eyes that never closed in sleep, but could vary from the dull opaque of dreaming to the bright gleam of intelligent thought. "Yes, it is," he growled, not at all pleased at being aroused from his slumbers. "Wonder what he wants. In 40 years, we've never heard directly from him before. She's paid the rent, hasn't she?" "Of course she has," said Vinetta indignantly. "Besides, it might not be from him." "And who else in Australia would have heard of us?" Sir Magnus gave his daughter-in-law a withering look. From the dressing room next door, Granny Tulip called plaintively, "What is it? What is it now?" She had chosen to sleep in the small room because she was often wakeful at night, and she liked to get on with her knitting. Sometimes in the wee small hours she was ceaselessly active. All day she would sit in the breakfast room downstairs knitting garments for the whole family. Her needles moved with fascinating speed. All of her movements were quick and economical. Even her speech was rapid and purposeful. Within seconds she was at Grandpa's bedside. She was, as always, fully dressed, wearing a blue and white checked apron. She was a very neat little woman with pure white hair and a deceptively tolerant, friendly expression on her fine-featured face. Without a word, she took the envelope from Grandpa's large mittened fingers and deftly opened it. Taking care of the bills was, after all, her job, and until the letter was opened, who was to say that it was not some unusual demand for money? What she read, though, through her little round spectacles, made her gasp in surprise. "Well, I never," she huffed, and read on as the other two watched her with keen curiosity. "Just imagine," she exclaimed. "Fancy that," she muttered as she reached the end of the second page. "What is it, Gran?" demanded Vinetta at last. "He's coming here. He's coming next month to see us all." A dull horror came over the room. "He can't be," bellowed Magnus forcibly, speaking from the depths of his great knowledge and his mound of snowy white pillows. "He must be about 80 by now. He won't be gallivanting all the way from Australia to see us after all these years. He didn't bother when he was 40. He certainly won't bother at 80. You haven't read the letter properly, woman." "Don't you, woman, me?" snapped Granny Tulip. "I read it all right. It's not Chesney who's coming. It's his nephew. Chesney's dead. The new owner is called Albert Pond. This could be serious." "He owns the house now," said Vinetta doubtfully. Magnus looked at the two women bleakly, his black eyes turning dull and lifeless. "Yes," he said in a grim voice, "if that's the case. He owns the house. It could fairly be argued that he owns us too." "We pay the rent," said Tulip firmly. "Every month, on the dot, I send a cheque to the agents. There can't be a better payer than us. Whenever they've increased the payment, we have paid the extra without a murmur. And we haven't asked for any repairs to be done. We are the ideal tenants. The new owner should be satisfied with that." "If he ever finds out what we really are," groaned Grandpa, "I shudder to think what he might do." So saying, he turned his back on the two women and pulled the counterpane right over his head. End of chapter 2. you.